Spear, and thank you for inviting me, and thank you for the introduction. Strandingsmuseum St. George reopened in 2017 after a major expansion with new architecture and a new exhibition. The first museum. The museum was originally established in 1992 to exhibit the objects from the excavation of the wreck of the English ship of the line, HMS St. George, which ran aground on the Danish west coast during the Napoleonic Wars. Another English ship of the line, the HMS Defence, stranded about 3 nautical miles to the north of the HMS St. George on the same day. In all, more than 1,300 people died in this catastrophe. In the years from 1984 to 1985, and again from 1996 to 1997, around 5,000 items were salvaged from the wreck of HMS St. George. Strandingsmuseum St. George is one of 3 museums under the umbrella of the historical museums in Holstebro municipality. The museum is located in Thorsminde, on the narrow isthmus between Nissum Fjord and the North Sea. And the museum has been expanded several times, first in 2001 as a direct consequence of the newer excavations from the mid-90s, and then most recently in 2015 to 2017. So the maps here on the right are just to show that there has been trade routes going around Jutland for a long time, and still are today. It's a very trafficked area. So, in connection with the expansion in 2001, a maritime archaeological center was established. This has the maritime archaeological responsibility for preservation of shipwrecks and other cultural heritage on the seabed in the museum's area of responsibility, which are the Danish territorial waters from the Limfjord in the north, which here is marked by the city of Thyborøn, to the national border with Germany to the south. Yeah. The location of the museum is very specific to the site near the stranding and the other stories we tell. The small fishing and tourist village of Thorsminde is located right between the sites where HMS St. George and HMS Defence stranded. Thorsminde, which today has around 300 inhabitants, is named after the outflow from Nissum Fjord. The village is relatively new, its location based on the first lock on the outflow, which was only established in 1870. This settled the outflow in its current position. In 1882, the lifeboat institution, Det Nørrejyske Redningsvæsen, was established in Thorsminde. This is still an important institution in the town, but luckily things at sea are very much safer now. Then in 1930, the Danish state re-established the lock with 2 drainage channels and a chamber lock for the boats. At the same time, the state also built 2 breakwaters on the seaside, and fishing really took off. Here you see an anchor, the 4-ton anchor from St. George, which was found and raised already in 1970. And it has stood as, to the entrance of the museum as a landmark for the town ever since it was raised. And it symbolically anchors both the museum and its history in Thorsminde. We also have an identical anchor, also from St. George, inside the museum. Anchors are strong symbols for sailors and coastal populations, and the museum's exhibition of many salvaged anchors have stood on display since the museum opened, first in the dunes behind the museum building and later arranged in an anchor park. Then, in 2003, so 11 years after the opening of the old museum, a large rudder was discovered at Rødsand Banks south of Lolland. This was the rudder which HMS St. George had lost because of a collision during a storm on the 15th of November 1811. The rudder was raised and transported to the museum. The rudder is very central to the story we tell in the museum. We believe that it was the loss of the rudder which indirectly caused the shipwreck off Thorsminde later that same year. It caused the delay, which made the final departure from Sweden later than planned, so it coincided with a terrible hurricane. The substitute rudder used in its stead apparently was not able to hold the course in the harsh conditions. The rudder is 18.5 meters tall, and when it was raised, it weighed more than 8 tons. It was not immediately clear how to store, let alone how to display it. For several years, it was stored in a shed next to the museum. The rudder is the main reason for the restoration of the museum. Currently weighing at 5 tons, at 11.5 meters tall and 192 years at the bottom of the sea, this object was so impressive that a large Danish foundation, together with the museum's home municipality Holstebro, invested in a complete transformation of the museum. Today, the rudder is a central element in the museum's new exhibition, suspended in a tower we built especially for this purpose. The architects behind the new building are the married Spanish-Danish architect couple Frank Norley and Gemma Lalanda. The structure is kept simple, but with an inherent strength to hold the dramatic stories told inside. It was important to rebuild the museum in such a way that the tower and the building would fit into the small fishing village of Thorsminde, so the museum could develop into a landmark for the village. The shapes and dimensions of HMS St. George was integrated in the new architecture. The number of floors correspond with the ship's decks, the height of the tower, certain angles, all were based on dimensions from the ship. The distinctive landmark is the high tower, which forms one large display case that stretches up and down through all the museum's major floors. This display case contains the rudder from HMS St. George, which hangs suspended from the ceiling. You can see it here on the right. There are 5 exhibition rooms, which we call galleries. Each function as independent scenarios, each with its own theme. St. George's Stranding and the objects from this wreck function as the main central narrative, and they are presented in Gallery 2. In each exhibition space, lighting design, sounds, smells, animations, and interactions are part of the communication as strong elements to appeal to the senses and the curiosity of the visitors. On top of this, we have some additional smaller rooms and hallways, some from which you can observe the large rudder, and a room right above the rudder, which has an amazing view of the North Sea. And you can also see the rudder through the hole in the floor. So this is probably going to be, I don't know how we will take this. Some of the timbers from St. George and from other ships have been integrated as furniture or otherwise as part of the exhibition. They are not displayed as objects themselves, but used as chairs and benches. Some timbers were used as flooring on 2 small bridges. The reason and the excuse given was that we do not have the means to conserve all the knees, planks, frames we have in storage. In fact, we do not even have storage space for all of it. Not all of the timbers used were part of the actual collection of the museum, but the ones that were, like all the timbers from St. George we had to first officially exclude the objects from the collection. So here you see a bridge. This is actually moved from Gallery 2 into Gallery 1, so it should have been the other way. Well, personally, I think it looks very good. The knees and frames, formerly known as objects, work well this way. There is also some symbolism, I believe, in the fact that when you enter Gallery 2, where we tell the story of the stranding of St. George, you cross a small bridge made from that ship. So, on the theoretical background, the museum deals with the history of strandings based in part on the specific stranding of St. George and defense, but the theoretical starting point is in the work by Hans Bloksgaard and his analysis on the history of strandings in Denmark from 1800 to 2000. This work deals with the strandings and the management of them and the developments they led to, and importantly, the culture that arose around this development. And its many variables. That means the crime, the greed, the helpfulness, compassion, and self-sacrifice. Bloksgaard defines the history of stranding as consisting of 3 elements: stranding, rescue, and salvage. The analysis and research of the strandings deals mostly with the causes, extent, nature, and development. The broadest development and distinction during this period is that in the 19th century, strandings were mostly a result of the weather, whereas in the 20th century, strandings were mainly due to failures and mistakes made on board. The dangerous weather in the North Sea is explained in our Gallery 1, very lively, lots of noise and sounds and waves. And the story of one particular stranding, that of the HMS St. George, is related and detailed in Gallery 2. The topic of rescue has had the most attention in general. Rescue operations became more effective from 1852 onwards, but up until today, when most of the original small stations have been shut down. The few search and rescue stations that remain today are, of course, far more effective. That is the symbol of the traditional symbol of the rescue stations in Denmark. The rescue operations are touched upon in Gallery 3, and what happened to the rescued people, both dead and alive, is also covered in Gallery 3. Salvage is covered with a focus on the analysis of the variety and development in the structure of the different companies and organizations, in particular the different forms of salvage associations. Salvage directly from the beach and the subsequent sale of the salvaged goods are described in Gallery 3. Underwater salvage and the development of diving gear is touched upon in Gallery 4. Different local salvage and diving companies are also featured in Gallery 4. So the reason why the underwater parts are in Gallery 4 is because that's in our basement. So symbolically, when you go into the basement, you are supposed to feel like you are underwater. And I think it works. The story presented by Bloksgaard describes a unique piece of Danish history characterized by considerable development and many local variations. It paints a picture of a part of Danish history that no longer exists, but that is where we come in. It would be an exaggeration to say that the local communities got rich from the strandings, because in general they did not. But the strandings did have an effect. The west coast has few trees. In fact, Thorsminde has none. So many of the older barns in the area are built with lumber from strandings, and so was a lot of the local furniture. In addition, positive things do come about from these events. You meet new people, all the seamen from faraway places come and stay at your house and you exchange stories. So many interpersonal gains from this. Sometimes marriage. And so the benefits are not only economical. In a sparsely populated area where many of the people are very religious, or at least they were, maybe they did not really socialize that much, so the event of a stranding was sometimes a good opportunity to meet your future spouse. This is way up in the 20th century. The auctions held over the salvaged goods were also sometimes very merry affairs for the not-so-religious people. An important part of the new museum was the engagement with the local community. The local community in Thorsminde has contributed a lot to the individual stories we tell. Some of the stories even feature some of the people who live here, or lived here. The local people have donated many objects to the museum, and they have helped tell the stories about many of the people mentioned in the museum. There is a sort of empowerment of the area in this, in that the museum strives to place the history about the culture of strandings into the greater history of Denmark. This special history is something in which the locals can take a certain pride. That aspect played an important part of the new museum. In 2019, the museum won the prestigious European Museum of the Year award in the Silletto Prize category, which is an award for the museum's co-creation with the surrounding local community. It was also important that the new museum would be appealing to a broad target audience, not just the local people. There are many families on vacation in the area, many Danish and German tourists, often families, so an effort was made to appeal to families and hopefully to everyone else as well. Many tourists do actually return and visit the museum year after year. The museum seeks to engage the visitor and presents its many stories in a way that appeal to everyone, regardless of age. The basic premise is that families should easily be able to read all the different texts to their child. Studies have shown that when they visit a museum, most visitors do not read the long texts in an exhibition, not even sometimes the shorter museum labels. When creating the text for the new museum, a lot of inspiration was drawn from the work of the Swedish author Margareta Ekav. The so-called Ekav method of text writing was originally developed for adults with reading difficulties. However, under the circumstances presented by the museum, everyone is affected. Not only children or adults with difficulties reading, it can be hard to concentrate for everyone. In a museum, there are many objects around to draw the attention and touch. And in our museum, there is a lot of sound and moving images. This means that you read the text in the exhibition in a completely different context than if you read a text in a book at home. So in our exhibition, or any exhibition maybe, everyone has reading difficulties. You have to read standing up, often on a hard floor. Reading angle is difficult, the lighting conditions, noise, disturbances, that all makes it hard for everyone. The exhibition in the museum also focuses more on stories than facts. True stories, of course. The small stories together create our broader narrative. So there are some things we try to keep in mind when writing the text for the museum. I have also written a few. These are important pointers, but they are not strict rules, as I will show you. So one thing to remember is to be specific. You have to avoid long, complex sentences. Do not make a long list of adjectives. Place the subject before the verb, if possible. Use the verb in the active form. Explain difficult words in the text. Begin a new line when there's a new meaning. Avoid abbreviations. And divide the text into pieces of an appropriate length. We have a special hierarchy of the length of the different kinds of texts we use in the museum. So the longest texts are the introductions to the different galleries. The gallery introductions, they are 100 words, and since we have 5 galleries, there are 5 of them. I couldn't bring one here today because they are quite large, with lots of graphics. Then we have these, we call them star stories. They are 50 words, so also the way they hang, presented like this, hanging, that enable tactility. You have to grab them and turn the pages to read them. So it's also a form of engagement. You have to grab them to read them. Yeah, this hopefully enables the learning. There is a very fixed number of these. I can't remember the exact number, but I do know that every time we add a new one, we have to remove another one. So it doesn't come too many of them. And then we have the museum labels. These are supposed to be 20 words. This is much longer, so this is to show that it's not that strict. And this is actually a text written by the first museum director, Jens, and that's also a reason why this text was kept, to keep the continuity. So this is museum label. So it breaks the rule, though. Even though the individual texts are short, there are probably a lot more, I think, than 40 pages of text in the exhibition. So if you read everything, it will take some time. The aim was that you should be able to experience and read everything in the museum in approximately 2 hours. However, you do not have to read all the stories. And when you leave, you should not feel like you missed something, even if you did not. So we also believe that as the basic premise, you only remember one story from visiting a museum. When designing the new exhibition, there was a special focus concerning what thoughts or feelings does the guest leave the museum with. What do they remember, and which main story stays with them. The guest should not walk away with a lot of knowledge about the Napoleonic Wars if this means that they forget the stories about the dangers of the North Sea and the specific culture this created on the West Coast. So the history of the Napoleonic Wars is very distant, and we do not expect that the guests know about it. And they are also not going to learn a lot about it at our museum. The Stranding of St. George presents a specific event, and life on board was frozen in time. In Gallery 2, you get the feeling that you are standing aboard a ghost ship. Historians may want to tell more details of this story, but the audience do not miss it. So there is no context given on the Napoleonic Wars in the entire museum. The narrative of the Stranding of St. George is placed into a larger story, where possible, the story is told through close and personal narration. People prefer to hear personal stories about other people because this is easier to understand and deal with. As an example of this, in Gallery 2, this is from Gallery 2, we have 7 specialized display cases, each with a different theme and some with a specific person at the center of the presentation. The objects from the ship are presented in a sort of stasis, as and where you would expect them to appear at the time of their use. There's a ghostly atmosphere to this part of Gallery 2. The guests have just learned about the catastrophe from a projection on a sail-like screen, and they have seen the many names of the drowned written on the wall. They then next enter what we call the orlop deck of HMS St. George. This is the main deck that was mainly excavated on the ship. And then they witness the life that once took place here. The ambient sounds, the creaking and the wind, make it feel like the ship is still sailing, but everything is also a bit distant and ghostly. The large screens show short clips of life-sized persons who represent the persons who use the objects featured in the display case next to them. But the persons displayed on the screen also appear ghostly. The skeletal remains of the ship's cat is in one of the display cases, and the cat also makes an appearance on the screens, as it's sometimes running from screen to screen. I think the bones from the cat is on the display case to the left. In the center of the room, on a long dining table, we present objects of a more general and leisurely nature. These are objects used for either entertainment or dining. Along this display case are 3D printed reproductions of some of the objects. See the plate, the gray plate next to the lead plate. That's a 3D printed reproduction. When the objects are touched, the owner of the object speaks in the room, not from the object, but someplace in the room, and with the voice of the owner, so it's in English, since it's an English ship. For instance, if you press the flute, a voice say, "Hey Jimmy, give us a tune," but in much better English. And then a flute plays in the room. If pressed again, it plays another tune, and so on. The objects on the table are arranged so the finer, more luxurious objects are at one end, and the more common objects are at the other end. This subtly illustrates the different classes on board the ship, but the visitors have to notice this class division by themselves. Each object has at least 2 or 3 different recordings, so the guest is enticed to interact with each object numerous times. We really want to engage the visitor and make them do something. This is another example of, on the left, a place where they can write postcards. So we ask them, imagine a lot of people stranded from a ship. What would you have ready for them? What would you offer them when they came to your doorstep? A lot of really good answers. Some not so good, but a lot of really good answers. So the people behind the museum made a very conscious choice, focus only on the last journey, which is what we call what we explain in Gallery 2. Therefore, there is no focus or even an explanation of the context of what we call the last journey, voyage. The context being, of course, the Napoleonic Wars. Why and how it involved Denmark, the gunboat war, etc. is not explained. There is only a single small indication that Danish privateers from Nyborg attacked the convoy in the Great Belt. Nevertheless, we would like to inspire the guests to learn more about this, or many of the other subjects on their own. In fact, we hope we do. Our shop at the museum sells books on many different topics touched upon in the exhibition if people are interested. This is from the inside of the big ship model I showed before. And then we have a new exhibition in our submerged gallery, Gallery 4. The new exhibition in Gallery 4 deals with the exploration and the inspiration of the world underwater in the 19th century. It features a number of artists inspired by the sea, and it also shows how scientists, artists and commercial interests began to explore the sea. This is from the opening of the exhibition. So we have a main message. When our guests leave, the main thing we hope that they have learned is, well, we hope they had a really good time and that they would like to come again. But if they learn something, what we hope they have learned is that the West Coast is and have always been dangerous, also for very large warships. We hope this message inspires them and stimulates reflection in the guests. Maybe they think about what this danger means, not only to the seamen, but also historically for the local community, next time they visit the beach, for instance. Oh, that was too soon. Ideally, they also reflect on the impact the sea has had on the people who live near it. The people here were and are tough. The men were always out fishing, so the women had to do most things by themselves. The area was extremely poor compared with the rest of Denmark. But they had a special culture here, and some of that culture is still present. And this is from the top of our tower. And those are my kids, so thank you very much.
So good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming today. It's a great pleasure to be here among esteemed colleagues and also dear friends, and thanks to the Danish Institute for making me part of this lecture series. As a maritime archaeologist, I felt early on in my studies that maritime archaeology extends well beyond the seabed. So it's not only limited to the act of underwater excavation and conservation, but it also relates to issues of heritage representation, cultural practices, and identity discourses. So today I will talk about an aspect of maritime heritage, namely traditional wooden boat building, as it is approached, researched and represented within museum practices that are developed in the Museum of the Aegean Boat Building and Maritime Crafts, which will open to the public in 2025 on the island of Samos, which is in the eastern Aegean Sea of Greece. Where am I supposed to be pointing? I have no clue. Thank you. So as the museum is not fully open yet, I don't have material from the interior, right, the ready-made rooms, let's say, because we're still bringing exhibits and the collection is being expanded, etc. But I will try to show you what we have ready in order to put it in the different exhibition rooms. So this project is a project of the municipality of Eastern Samos, and both its museological and its museographic studies have been approved by the Ministry of Culture and Sports. Now, most of the Greek maritime museums have only recently started to adopt and reflect on modern historiographic trends, following the path of contemporary critical maritime historiography, in order to explore and display all experience of mankind related to the use of the sea. For example, socioeconomic aspects of the maritime past, maritime economies, fishing, coastal trade, maritime labor, shipping, shipbuilding, ethnographic studies of seafarers, for example, or gender-specific studies by female maritime historians. In this vein, the Museum of the Aegean Boat Building and Maritime Crafts is fully dedicated to the rescue, research and display of all aspects of wood and shipbuilding and maritime crafts of the Aegean. The museum's main aim is to preserve, safeguard, research, present and communicate to the public both the tangible and intangible aspects of wood and shipbuilding as maritime heritage. Now, wooden shipbuilding in Greece, it was listed in the National Inventory of Intangible Cultural Heritage in 2013. And according to the inventory, wooden shipbuilding is the handcraft construction of a vessel through the use of natural timber and all its related stages, from conception and design to construction, equipment, decoration, and its relevant cultural practices and mentalities. It is considered a living traditional craft that has been practiced in Greece for centuries. It possesses unique technical, typological and cultural characteristics, some of which can be traced in the Middle Ages and the Byzantine Empire. The craft's transmission from one generation to the next is still accomplished through empirical apprenticeship, which entails younger people learning the craft by walking side by side with a master craftsman. Other times it's family related, other times it's just someone going to become an apprentice and then learn the craft. So visitors of this museum, they will be encouraged to delve into both the material culture of wooden boat building, and the principal expressions of which are certainly the kaiks, so the wooden boats, and the shipbuilder's tools, as well as the numerous intangible and immaterial expressions of the craft, which are associated with traditional craftsmanship, oral traditions and expressions, social practices, rituals and festive events, as well as knowledge and practice about nature and the universe. Regarding traditional craftsmanship, shipbuilding is considered among the most complex traditional practices, drawing from broad and diverse fields of knowledge and techniques, and it is closely associated with the technical developments of each period as well as the raw materials available. That's why we can never say that, these people had better techniques than some other cultural groups, exactly because you have to know what's available, and this strictly depends on how this technology is involved in very specific local contexts. Regarding the oral traditions, just before it starts, thank you. I just wanted to say that we have a large archive of oral testimonies, and recorded interviews by shipbuilders or sea people relating to the techniques and the knowledge applied in wooden shipbuildings. So this is a video, okay, it's quite long, so I don't think we have time to watch all of it, just to give you an example. So most interviews are quite technical. It's mainly illustrating how someone works on site. However, we do have interviews concerning, the difficulties of the profession or the hardship of the life of the shipbuilder. As you mentioned also before, it was mainly a man's world, so women were left behind at the community to, take care of the family, take care of the household, do the other chores. It's a bit similar also in the Greek fishing and sea-related communities. So we have also a lot of this information. And something else is the terminology used, which is very different, I would say, at some parts regarding the colloquial language that we use today. So it's very specific words. Some do resemble other words that we use in Greek, but in completely different contexts, and others are words just used by shipbuilders in order to make sense and understand what each one is saying to each other. About the knowledge and practice regarding the nature and the universe, also one has to have a very high experience as to how to acquire the most suitable timber for shipbuilding, the wood cutting, the resin content of the wood, and the manipulation of its fibers and its proper drying after the cutting. So it's a whole network of knowledge until you get, to the first stages of actually constructing a boat. So the Museum of Samos is inextricably linked with the place, both as a geographical location and as a cultural landscape. Samos is an island with a long boat building tradition and active traditional shipyards, thanks to its mountainous terrain and the wealth of its pine trees. And this abundance in pine trees ensures the availability and the aptness of the shipbuilding timber. So, as asserted by Damianidis, throughout the 20th century, most traditional shipyards in Greece ordered timber from Samos as, due to its high content of pine resin, it was considered the most appropriate for constructing durable kayaks, suitable for the particular Aegean Sea weather conditions. The museum is designed to operate through a network of educational and research activities in an attempt to reflect on and adopt the museum definition by the International Council of the Museum. So, as a non-profit institution, the museum in Samos researches, collects, conserves, interprets, and exhibits key aspects of the maritime craftsmanship, explored through ethnographic studies in the boatyards and ports of the Aegean, and also through archaeological research on Aegean shipwrecks. For instance, an animated video that will be playing inside the exhibition is how to understand these lines on the so-called lofting floor, which is a floor where the shipbuilders design the lines of the ship, which will be sort of then transferred to proper wood pieces, let's say. So they will start constructing all the skeleton. Also, the museum narrative focuses on the individuals behind all those techniques and on the empirically transmitted knowledge. And an impressive part of the permanent exhibition, the permanent collection, is the 10 traditional boats, caiques, which have been salvaged from different places of the Aegean by the municipality of Eastern Samos. And once conserved, they will be exhibited at the museum's courtyard. Already we have 3 of them. They have arrived. We're waiting for 3 more this month. So I think in a few months we will have the entire collection. They would be also visited. I mean, one could go on board, not just look at them from afar. And we have some part of the exhibition inside them relating to coastal trade mostly, the types of merchandise, lives of sailors, etc. Additionally, we have more than 200 shipbuilding tools that form part of our permanent collection. Along with a large number of ship's drawings, ship's models, molds, logs, notarial documents, business records, and other material evidence from shipyards and naval enterprises of the Aegean. The museum's collection, however, is not limited only to the material culture of wood and shipbuilding, as it also documents, safeguards, and communicates to the public evidence of the intangible cultural heritage we saw a bit before, such as recorded or videotaped oral testimonies of craftsmen, of sailors. We have a large collection of archival photographs, film, video footage that documents shipbuilding and maritime activities in the Aegean, mainly from the second half of the 20th century. That's another video related to the oral testimonies. I like this because it has, it interviews people who are currently boat builders here. They are a bit younger, but still they're very active on the island of Samos. I don't know why this doesn't have sound, though. It used to have. Let's see. Something I find very difficult to understand still after all those years is how to sort of explain with simple words what you do empirically, because it's so complex. I mean, it has experiential mathematical knowledge, and that's why I think these interviews are very helpful in addition to the rest of the material we have in the exhibition. Of course, it's optional for anybody who wants to delve a bit deeper into the whole craft. The number of interviews included in this archive exceeds the 200, and it is constantly being enriched as new research is being carried out. Also, the museum in its library has the photographic archive, the archive of drawings, and the video archive. And of course, it will all be available to researchers. And as a result of the close collaboration between the museum and the University of the Aegean, the Department of Mathematics that is based in Samos, we have the Laboratory of Mathematical Modeling, which will operate at the museum's premises. They have already an office dedicated, for their study. And also we have the Open Conservation Laboratory, which is a fully equipped space of 120 square meters, where conservation of exhibits and various technical applications will take place. So visitors there will be able to watch the works in progress, to use or make traditional tools, so to experiment a bit more hands-on, and to participate in the design phases of a wooden boat or try other works related to shipbuilding, thus gaining knowledge on woodworking. Lastly, on the museum's premises, there will be a certified apprenticeship school on traditional shipbuilding, which is planned to operate in 2025. So this is something completely new. We've announced it a few months ago at the Hellenic Maritime Museum. And it will be a 2-year program followed by 1-year apprenticeship in shipyards of the Aegean and at the museum, especially regarding the conservation of the permanent exhibition's wooden boats. So it is a program by the Ministry of Culture, which is carried out by the University of the Aegean, School of Science and Department of Mathematics, and it's subsidized already since 2021 by the Directorate of Modern Cultural Intangible Heritage. So what has been subsidized so far is the creation and the writing up of the manuals. There will be 4 manuals on traditional craftsmanship on wooden shipbuilding, both in Greek and English. And these were so far written by a mixture of people. So we had experts in woodworking, we had Mr. Papasalouros from the mathematics department, and also 20 experienced shipwrights, as well as 3 woodworkers. So it's a collective work. Of course, the museum is not only destined to academic researchers. Providing first-hand experiences to the broad public and to different subgroups is one of our main aims. Therefore, emphasis is placed on education through the design of educational programs for different public groups. We have an education room and also a multi-purpose room. So we will have programs for school students throughout the year, so for the local school children, and also we will have summer courses for independent groups of kids that we will be formed during the summer. We are planning to have summer courses that last from 1 week to 1 month. These are for adults, focusing on specific techniques of wooden boat building, such as the design of the lofting floor, the sala that we watched before, or the construction of ship models, or the traditional caulking of a boat. And another big part of our public outreach, and you talked also before about community engagement, and this is something very important for us, especially because the museum is based on a little village, the village of Ireo, so you need the local community to be part of it. Is that we created in 2017 the Association of the Friends of the Museum. So as its purpose, it has to support the museum and its various actions around boat building and Aegean maritime heritage, to connect the museum with the local community, to promote the CAIX as monuments of the maritime cultural heritage, but also act in terms of a more institutionalized level towards their protection or the dissemination of knowledge around them, to nurture the interest of young people about the Aegean maritime heritage, and also to support research, educational, exhibition, cultural and publishing activities of the museum itself. So this is the link, the woodenboats.gr is the link to an online platform we created as the Friends of the Association of the Museum a few years ago. So this platform aims at sensitizing, I would say, people towards what is happening in relation to the destruction of the wooden boats in Greece, but also to create awareness about shipbuilding itself. And one very interesting part is that we accept testimonies, either written or on a video maybe, or just as a voice message. Any way you want, I invite you now. You can send us your testimony regarding either traditional shipbuilding, or maybe some people are sea people or fishermen or sailors, or they are directly affected by these measures having to do with the destruction of the wooden boat. So we're trying to create also an archive of experiences relating to this situation. So I invite you to visit our platform. And also, as the Association of Friends, we try to design workshops and educational programs well before the museum opened, exactly to start familiarizing the people with this field of study and with this craft, but also to enrich the collection. So, for example, here you see the workshops and the educational programs created after we received this kind donation by Mr. Vlavianos, who donated to the museum his collection of objects about the sewing of the veils of the wooden boats, of the kayaks. And we had a series of talks in Samos, that was just before COVID, back in 2020, and some workshops both for kids and adults on how to use these objects. We also organize cultural activities for the local communities there. So the first poster had to do with a talk by a local, she's a lady and she's a local author, but she also does a lot of ethnography and collects oral narratives. And then we had a concert, again with local musicians who play traditional music, and it was dedicated to the sea and the kayaks, as we have many, many such songs in the Greek culture. In the middle, there is our calendar of 2022, and this was an endeavor after we gave a call to the local schools, and the school children visited with their teachers a little village called Ormos, and Ormos was very famous for its shipyards. And so then they were inspired by the visit, so they came up with the drawings which we included in the 2022 calendar. And the last one is the lofting floor in its making. So it has more ships. Now you only see two, the black and the yellow. And this is an exact copy from the last lofting floor existing in the shipyards of the Aegean, the Mavrikos shipyard in Syros. So this will be the main entrance hall as you enter the museum. And two artists were commissioned by the municipality of Samos in order to design everything, but we made an open call to local residents. So if they wanted to participate in the drawing and the designing, they would be guided by the two artists who were responsible. So it was a very nice endeavor, I think. And we also try to participate in academic conferences, in lectures, in art exhibitions, etc. And this is because we anticipate that all those actions, both inside the museum and outside, both academic and for the broad public, they demonstrate a very systematic attempt to care for the heritage of the Aegean wooden shipbuilding on many levels, cultural, educational, institutional, especially as a counteract against the threats that wooden boat building has been facing for the last 30 years. So, according to our colleague Katerina Velenza, the traditional shipbuilding profession is in rapid decline since the last decades of the 20th century due to several core problems that the shipbuilders are facing. In Greece, at least. So these are the promotion of mass tourism that changes rapidly local economies, the reduced fleet of traditional wooden boats, the lack of official governmental protection or support, the aggressive competition by the market of plastic and fiberglass boats, the reduced manpower and the lack of skilled workers that are trained in traditional boat building, and the government subsidies for the regulation of the fishing fleet, which demands that the fishermen give away their licenses and their wooden boats are destroyed. So I think that this last parameter has been the most damaging policy of all for the Greek traditional boats. As stated by the Traditional Boats Association of Greece, there is more than 13,000 traditional wooden kayaks that have been destroyed in the last 25 years. So imagine you are in a small island that is traditionally considered a fishery, right? A fishing place or a place where coastal trade is developed. And then you see the cultural landscape changing completely. So fishing boats are disappearing, shipyards are closing down, plastic boats are taking over, fishermen are leaving their profession. So an expression of this maritime tradition is being obliterated under the responsibility of the Greek state and the EU, as the destruction of fishing boats is unfortunately done with the state and European subsidies, which devalue the creations of the traditional boat building. So for us, it is unacceptable that Greece as a country has registered the craft of wooden boat building in the National Inventory of Intangible Cultural Heritage, and at the same time, they keep subsidizing its destruction. It's just so contradictory. So it is amidst this complex situation that the Museum of the Aegean Boat Building and Maritime Crafts, along with the Association of the Friends of the Museum, aspire to act at a level of prevention, safeguarding, dissemination of knowledge and local engagement, as is the sociopolitical role of any contemporary museum that actively involves itself in pertinent matters beyond the limits of its premises. Thank you very, very much.
As always, I'll start this discussion with our discussion, Joanna, and the first comment is from her.
Okay. I should use
Yes, please.
Well, I would like to congratulate both of you. They were very engaging, really, presentations, and full of insights, and thought-provoking, of course. I would like to remark first that those are both new exhibitions, new museums, and thus they serve paradigms of contemporary museological and museographical narratives. They blend, as we saw, traditional museum practices with modern exhibition narratives, interactive exhibits, and by doing so they manage in a way to convey effectively the story they present.
We try.
Yes, of course. No, you try very well. Now they also set a standard of how a modern museum space, it's not only an educational hub, but it also offers entertainment to its visitors, isn't it? So, a question about it is how the new exhibition narratives, which actually primarily showcases local heritage and artifacts, manage to adapt to the changing societal interests and expectations, to modernize old themes, let's say, and to make it relevant to broader public.
Who's first?
The Strandingsmuseum St. tries to make new exhibitions, at least a somewhat major overhaul every 2 years, like a new model ship. I'm sure a tiny bit of was from our special exhibit right now. And then this year we had a new exhibition in our basement, Gallery 4. So, as I mentioned, a lot of the visitors come year after year, which we are very happy that they do, but we also want to show them something new every time they come. Well, maybe not every time, but at least every other time. And then, as there are in every other year, there's like it should be a new special edition or something major, then the other every other year there's a minor upgrades. So we change a bit.
Yeah.
That's the point, at least. Yeah. And I think it's worked so far.
Great. Okay, for us this has been quite hard and difficult to do. First of all, we haven't opened yet, so I cannot be talking about, practices that are actively going. So of course it's a plan to host periodic temporary exhibitions or conferences, like the conference of the Hellenic Maritime Museums once the museum is up and running, or an exhibition that last year was in Thessaloniki, and now it's going to Crete, and then it will come to Samos, from stern post to stem, and it has newer technologies than our new technologies. So, of course, these are part of the museum politic, but for the time being, it was really difficult to simplify, I would say, all this very complex terminology and all the steps one by one from where you start until the time the boat goes into the water, which is totally related to science, I would say, scientific knowledge, even if it is empirically transmitted, to put it into simple text, not very long, not very complex, that, the broad public could read. So we've gone through it many times. I mean, I remember reading and saying, I don't understand that, we have to simplify it more and more and more. And then, my director was saying, but if we simplify it, then how do we explain everything in a correct way? And he's right. So I think we're managing to give old subjects in a more modernized way, let's say, through the means that are framing the collection itself, but always trying, to be respectful towards the art or towards what we know from that the shipbuilders directed us to say. Also the hands-on part and the experiential part, I think, plays a vital role. So that's why we have the open conservation laboratory, and that's why we're planning to have the summer courses, both hands-on in terms of woodworking, but also with trial sails. The museum is located right at the seashore, like your museum actually. So sailing as an experience, but also the knowledge of how to sail will be part of it once it opens. So I think that's a way to do that. Okay, great.
The next subject that I would like to remark is the relation, the engagement with the community. Every modern museum wants to be available and beneficial for its community. To have this both ways interaction and help, as you say. It is important to involve the local community in the museum projects, like conserving items or make them locals participate in guided tours and things so on. It helps preserve traditional skills and also knowledge about the special theme of the museum, which is actually their own tradition. Also, the museums have an economic impact besides that. Hopefully, economic impact. They create jobs, employment jobs. They work like as touristic attractions. So they generate business related to tourism. But by doing those, which are beneficial, of course, for the community, there are also challenges. And the challenges, can they foster a sustainable development, especially in regions like yours, which have sensitive natural environment? Meaning that creating a touristic business, there are entrepreneurs who seek for easy profit. This is contradictory to the museum logic, and what it represents. So there must find a way to avoid these frictions and tensions. Do you think it is possible? Or do you have any this kind of problem, face this kind of problems?
On a lot of the Danish west coast, there are a lot of developments for tourism. There is not that much in Thorsminde, where our museum is, and a lot of the people who come to the village like that. It's not very developed. So this draws another kind of tourist or guest, I suppose. And also the people in the village are not interested in big hotels. I mean, they would like yachts, of course, and a lot of them do work. Not a lot, but so there are some who work here. And the museum guides are also local people. So when we have a school class or something, it's usually someone from the area, and if there's no one available, it's me or my colleague. I mean, the people who benefit financially from the museum in the area live there. So, and I know them. So I don't.
You see any problem?
No, I don't think so. And I think they would manage even if the museum wasn't there. I think it's benefit, but the beach is very a big magnet in itself, and the harbour, a lot of people come just to fish. So then when we are so lucky that it rains or it's bad weather, which is quite often in Denmark, they instead go inside and visit us.
I see. But I have in mind also the Aegean Islands. Very difficult, beyond the tourism effect.
Here in the summer we have good weather, so you know, it's a plus. Okay, for us, let me think. First of all, a sustainable way, we think that comes from the wooden boats themselves. I mean, if you compare the wood, that is a natural material, these boats can last up to 30, 40 years if they were constructed, contrary to the plastic ones that the repairs cost really a lot, and then, you know, you just buy a new one, you ditch it somewhere, and it's never recycled, it's there, littering everything. But obviously, I don't mean to go back to the coastal trade of the 50s, you know, with the kayaks going from a place to the other, but they could definitely have a museum use, for example, not just by us, but maybe for cultural associations that are based on the island, or the municipality itself. The other thing, however, is that even if Samos is not an island connected with mass tourism, it's a very quiet island, I would say, but the eastern part, where the museum is, and it's close to the main archaeological site, Ireon, and it's close to the airport and to the two main towns of the island, it has some sort of mass tourism network, proper hotels, charter flights, etc. So once, at the very early stages of the creation of the museum, it must have been 2015, I think, or 16. So it's been going on for years, our project. I can explain why. So we invited representatives of these businesses that bring the charters and the mass tourism packages on the island to say, like, how could we connect the museum with your people? And what most of them told us is that, you know, yeah, if you give us commission, that's very easy to do. We said, no, we don't want to give any commission to anybody. It's a municipal museum, and, you know, it has to do with education, entertainment, as you said, local economies, etc. So I think there are two different worlds completely, and we're talking a different language. So obviously this is not something that interests us. First of all, when I say us, okay, I refer to us working on the exhibition, but we're not the official administrators of the museum, nor are we going to run it ourselves. So it's the municipalities, once we finish and we submit the full project, it's the municipalities' work to employ people, and that's our main principles, to employ local people. And there will be actually a need for a lot, because obviously you need someone or more than one to guard it. You need people at the ticket office or the shop. You need a museum educator, as we're going to have this many. They're already designed, I mean, the educational programs for all the school levels. You need people, conservators at the Open Conservation Lab. You need to collaborate with the local shipbuilders. So it's a vast network, plus the cafeteria that will be rented out to, again, we hope, a local person. So the sort of so-called study of viability of the museum, it is created, but then we don't know if it's going to be enforced by the municipality, and also under which principles they were going to do that. Yeah.
So there's only positive prospects for the community. Yes.
From our side.
Yes, I believe so. And lastly, it's that in both thematics of the museums, it's the theme of the loss. Well, in the museum in Strandingsmuseum, it's more obvious. It talks about catastrophes and loss of human lives at sea, dangerous at sea. You also mentioned the word fear, danger. And in the museum itself, it's quite different, because while you are talking about the significance of the traditional boat building for the Greek maritime heritage, its integral role in the Hellenic maritime tradition, you can't avoid mentioning the subject of the subsidy destruction of the kayaks. Which unfortunately it's popular between the fishermen, because the compensation that the Greek government and the EU gives for destroying their ships, it's very generous, and that's a severe blow, as you mentioned, for the cultural characteristic and landscape of the Aegean Sea. So, in light of this, how can the Strandingsmuseum Museum raise awareness about subjects of safety of navigation, and at the end foster love for the sea and the sea travels?
Well, to begin with, our museum also deals with the loss of culture of the Strandings brought to the whole west coast.
Because that culture has
disappeared more or less entirely now. So it presents that culture as it was, and the benefits, all sides of it. And then in our gallery 1, we tell what kinds of instruments they used for navigation in the 19th century. We don't really tell that much about the modern navigation. We have had one special exhibition about a lot of the things that wash up on the coast now, which is to trash junk. So that's not so nice, of course, but it's also a story to tell. Why is it there? Where does it go? That was one of the special exhibitions we had. I don't think we talked about
Something about safety, as they
not to the modern.
all these losses have taught us.
Well, we tell a lot about the dangers of the sea and why the routes to Baltic Sea was very dangerous. So of course they traveled there because they had to get resources and trade in the Baltic to the rest of Europe, really. And all the dangers are explained: the currents, the winds, the fog, and the coastline, which is very monotonous. So it's dunes all the way from mostly from the Baltic Sea. Yeah, it is. But you can't navigate, and up until the latter half of the 19th century, there were no harbours. You could enter one of the biggest harbour cities, Esbjerg, was established in 1871, I think. And as I mentioned, the old lock was from 1862. No, 1870, but that was not like a real lock for traveling into Nissum Fjord. So we talk about the light towers and the signals, so the sailors could navigate, see where they were, but not really anything new.
Something reassuring. No, it's great. And I have to say also the question for Elena, the museum summers. So the problem is the subsidized destruction of the cake with government and UN money. So they say to people, change your profession, start building ships, actually. And as we said, it's a big contradiction to the importance of the cultural of the place, of Greek, maritime character and identity. So, can the museum be an advocate for sustainable uses of fishing boats? And I'm saying this because the UN doesn't need to distract the kayak to give the finance, the compensation. It's okay if you find other ways. You decommission it and you use it in another ways. Can the museum advocate for the kayaks in order to preserve them for the future generations, to advocate for new uses of them?
Yes and no. I mean, it has already been doing that in some way for many years, mainly through talks and submission of proposals and press conferences, and some of which you have been also present. Okay, to be realistic, if you're a fisherman and your wooden boat costs 20,000, 30,000, let's say, to build it, or you've already built it, it's now old, you need 10,000 or 15 to repair it, and depending on how old it is and depending on its current condition, the ministry gives you, the government gives you from 50,000 maybe to 90,000 euros if you destroy it, and of course you decommission it, you destroy it, and you also give up your license. Most people, especially in the current situation that we are living, I think, they would say, why not? And that's why we have a lot of interviews by people, also recorded by us, but there has been a lot written on the press, who underwent this situation, and you see them crying or almost lamenting for these laws, despite the money. So you understand that to a point, there's always a choice, but if we take into account the economic and the political scene, I guess that for some people it's the only option. Now, if we were to change that, and I'm not an expert on policies, but at least from my experience so far in this field, the uses in Greece would be either to have it under museum use, so different maritime museums in the country own some and preserve them as monuments of intangible heritage, but also as something that is used for educational reasons or recreational reasons in the sea. This has happened in the past, and we've seen that because of the lack of funding, all these institutions or agents were unable to fund the conservation or the preservation, so the ships were left into decay. So that's a big problem. The other way would be if they were owned by cultural associations or municipalities for the same reason. Maybe this would be a bit more viable, because if you're a large institution like state institution, supposedly you can secure funding for this a bit easier than a small, local museum, especially if it's privately run, as many maritime museums of the periphery in Greece. The other way is for the ships to operate, so to change license and operate as sea taxis or recreation as means of transporting small islands from beach to beach, etc. Some people have done that, to be honest. There are aspirations by some devoted sea people to have a kayak and conduct coastal trade. So in a way to bring back, what was happening in the past. But I think it's down to policy making. So far, the existing policy, I wouldn't say that it encourages these changes. And also funding. And we know that in Greece, usually this is a top-down way to decide about these things and regulate these things. So I'm not very optimistic, to be honest, because we're talking about, policy changes on a national level, and this takes time. So yes, the museum does advocate, and it will once it opens with its practice, but I think it's just a small part of what's going on in the entire country regarding the destruction of the kayaks.
Well, it's a start.
Hopefully.
When it starts working and it is successful, it is a good start, and maybe creates another examples for preserving the wooden boat building. And that's it, I won't torture you anymore.
Should we engage
You've been
people
great.
if they have any questions? We still have a few minutes.
This is for us.
I can hold that. Anything? Yes, please.
Thank you to both the speakers. For Mr. Jensen, I don't have a question, but I would like to declare that I have visited the museum of HMS St. George when I was a student in Esbjerg, and it was amazing how much it has changed. Congratulations for that. I was able to see the rudder when it was yet at the storage room, and record with my professor some of the cannons.
Oh, I've seen those drawings.
Yes, it was in 2009, so the old days. And so thank you for this. I would like to come back and see this again. And for Lena, I have a question. I would like to ask, how did you manage all this material you have, not the tangible material, the intangible material you spoke about, because the tradition is there still now. And I think it's not only for Samos you talked about, right? It's the whole Greece, and if this is also a part of the many years it took to arrive here. I think it is anyway a very systematic work. So it is also, I have the impression, I don't know, that when this museum will open, it will be very, very nice and well organized. So this is the question, how do you manage this information you have? This?
Hopefully it will be very nice. We're looking forward to it. It's about to open, I mean, it was about to open this year, but then it got a bit more postponed until next year. How do we manage it? First of all the recordings and the data collected, it's not necessarily new. As the museum's, the director of the whole project of setting it up, Kostas Damianidis, he has been collecting oral testimonies and recording also people, but boats and the construction phases since 1984. So it's been many, many decades throughout Greece, as you said. That's why it's called the Museum of the Aegean Boat Building and not just of the locality of Samos. So all of them are catalogued. So there is a database on oral testimonies, I mean, we collaborate also with other ethnographers like Miranda Terzopoulou, who has done an extensive research as well. The black and white photos I showed, they're from her research, and she donated them to the museum. So that's why I said that the collection keeps being expanded. And of course, there is a lot of work being done with shipbuilders that are currently on Samos, but also on other shipyards, for example, Evia or Perama, etc., on techniques, on how to sew the veils, on sailing, etc., etc. So the vastness of the collection, it wasn't so much a problem as to how to manage it, but as to what to select, what to include, who not to leave out, who not to feel underrepresented, and as I said, how to give that all in a simplified way, of course, to be understood beyond the circles of the shipbuilders. Yes, so the delays were due to other reasons, like COVID, the companies we are collaborating with in terms of conservation or printing, etc., they shut down, or then the earthquake in Samos that was really distracting, so the municipality obviously dedicated all the efforts to restore the destroyed houses, so the works stopped, and a lot of different things. Yes, and another, sorry, to go back to the collection, is that, as I said, it will be accessible to researchers. So anyone who would like to work on the oral history of shipbuilding, and when I say shipbuilding, I mean in general, not just the techniques, obviously, but anything in terms of socioeconomics relating to shipbuilding, they will be accessible to the public at the museum's library, along with all the videos and the photographic archive. So that, I mean, that's a way to, both manage it, catalog it, but also communicate it, especially anything that is not included or cannot be included in the permanent exhibition. And definitely it will be open, to a re-approach, if I could say it, of this collection to create temporary exhibitions from time to time with a material that is not permanently exhibited.
I guess we can continue over a glass of wine. Thank you all for coming, especially thank you for coming and talking to us.
I have a question.